tell you something, brother. When I'm working on my 24-inch pythons, dude, I'm listening to Let's Find Out with Diego. Train, say your prayers, and listen to Let's Find Out with Diego. Ooh, what you gonna do, brother, when Let's Find Out with Diego runs wild on you?
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest is the author of Aliens in the Apocalypse, The Meaning of Alien Messages. With a multitude of publications spanning books, magazines, and newspapers, he has made significant contributions to the field as a member of the MUFON Board of Directors from 1993 through 2000, as a MUFON consultant in physiology and astronomy, and a field investigator. The surge in supernatural communication, exemplified by the increased UFO sightings, this rise in discussions also extends to the topic of religious figures possibly being interpreted as ancient astronauts. Such developments indicate a noteworthy shift in the dialogue surrounding supernatural occurrences, prompting further exploration and questions into this phenomenon. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a new friend to our show, Dr. Scott. My friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. I'm very happy to have you on with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, absolutely. The minute I received information about you, your bio and your books, my goodness, I knew I had to have you on. I reached out to you, and I'm very thankful that you agreed to be on the show. And now, your book, Aliens in the Apocalypse, The Meaning of Alien Messages, it didn't come out too long ago. It's an amazing topic that we'll be getting into in just a little bit. But before we start talking about the book, you were with MUFON for a pretty long time. One of those generic questions I'll ask you, how did you become a member and a field investigator for MUFON?
I became a member. I had UFO sightings, and I was in the field of science, and so I didn't go around talking about them. But I had done a scientific investigation of a mystery, and I found out about that Ohio had UFO organizations, and I joined some Ohio UFO organizations, and I found out about MUFON, so I joined it too. And so I've been there for a while.
Yeah, and when you funny mentioned Ohio, I lived there for a number of years. Actually, I lived in Middletown, which is I don't know, probably now it's grown. It's right between Cincinnati and Dayton, off of I want to say Interstate 75. And back then, a lot of these topics weren't really discussed. This is back in the very early 90s. And there were a lot of talks about different places in Ohio that were haunted. And I definitely went out there with some friends to try to take a look. I had no business going there. I was very young. But Ohio is very rich in these type of things, especially with UFOs. With you as a field investigator in MUFON, you probably interviewed several people and done a lot of investigations. A lot of mixed feelings about some testimony from some people. So what is it that these testimonies have in common? Is there a common alien race that's making these that's communicating with certain people and the abductions, or are these different races altogether?
I don't know. It's kind of like my opinion from sort of like my own experience. Like you can't see gravity, you can't see radio waves, and there's a lot of things in our environment that we can't see, and that maybe what we call the aliens or whatever are a member of that, and they can cause us to see something that we interpret whatever way we decide to interpret. But I don't know, there's so many different, like models of spaceships, like models of cars and things. And I would say that some of them are images that they put in our minds.
That's very interesting. I was just going to say, is this something that they're doing through telepathically? Because not always these experiences they're not always physical.
Yeah, my sister and I had experience when we were real young, and we'd never heard of UFOs or anything else and didn't know what it was. But it sort of, after I understood it, kind of taught me some things.
And with your experience, if you don't mind, could you share what happened and around the time frame?
It was when we were real young. She wasn't in school yet, and I don't know whether I was or not, but it was years before we ever heard of UFOs. And what happened was we went to bed, and I woke up, and there was this thing in our room flying around, and I had no idea what it was. It looked like an actual tic-tac that they talk about now. But it was just a little thing. It glowed. It was dark, and it was flying around the room. And I didn't figure out. I had no idea what it was. I wasn't scared, but apparently my sister woke up before I did, and she kind of knew I was awake, but I didn't know she was awake. And the thing flew around like it was kind of looking at us or getting close to us, and we were in separate beds on either side of the room. And I must say, the weather was clear. My whole family remembered that because we didn't know what UFOs were, so we didn't know not to talk about them because we didn't know anything about them. So we talked about it. But it flew around, and then it went to one side of the room. And what I noticed, first of all, that young age was it knew where things were. It was dark in the room, but it never bumped into a wall. It would go around furniture and stuff. So it was like something alive, but it was nothing like a lightning bug or anything like that. It flew up, it went to one end of the room, flew up, and flew right across the ceiling. And we had a chandelier in the ceiling, middle of the ceiling, that was turned off, and it was an attic room with the walls that came up together in the middle, about 3 feet apart. Well, the chandelier hung down the middle of that. What flew to the chandelier, and it didn't feel its way around or anything. It just began to circle the chandelier. And it circled and circled and circled, and then it just came down in a perfect spiral. And then it disappeared. And suddenly, both of us were just absolutely terrified. I mean, neither one of us knew what it was, and we were just calmly watching it. And suddenly, we both became absolutely terrified and ran out of the room. And we were so scared, we bumped into each other and tumbled down the stairs, and we couldn't get the stair door open. We ran to our parents, and they said, "This didn't happen. You're making it up."
No, it was definitely quite real. Now, prior to this experience,
if it would have been just me or her, they would have said it's a dream. But both of us saw it, so we knew it wasn't a dream.
No, absolutely. I've had experiences myself, and it's one of those things people say, "Oh, you're just making it up," until it happens to them. That kind of changes the skeptics' minds pretty quickly. And prior to these experiences, did your family have any history or anything like paranormal or UFO related?
Well, my sister and I had another sighting, quite a long sighting, when we were older together. And we found out that other members of the family had, but nobody talked about them. And so we just sort of found out kind of late that other people had.
It's indeed true, because back even when I was growing up, not many people discussed these things. because they were afraid of the backlash or being accused of something that, may not have been true, especially if you grew up in a religious household, because those are the kind of things they didn't want you messing with, and this is just forget it, keep moving on. So were there more experiences as you got older, or did it stop?
It stopped about maybe 10 years ago. I didn't have that many, but my sister and I had a real big experience once. If you want me to tell you about that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I was working for the DIA, and I had a PhD level position in photo interpretation. I mean, with one of those real top secret, high CSI type clearances. And it was working on satellite photography to identify aircraft. So I should have been up on this thing. My sister was at Drew University taking postgraduate work. And we started out here in Ohio, but we were both on the coast. And so we wanted to go up and see the New England states since we were both on that end of the country. And so I went from Washington and I picked up a couple of coworkers and drove up to where she was at Drew University and took some pictures of them. And we drove up to Boston because we were planning to stay all night in Boston, but it was daylight. And so I went on up north, and on Route 3 in New Hampshire. And I think I found out later that we were sort of in the way of the same place as some of the Hill abduction was. But we came back to Boston. We couldn't find a place to stay, and so we were going to go around the outer belt and look. And as we were leaving, there was an airport on south of us called the Norwood Memorial Airport, and we could see airplanes coming in and with their landing lights on, their wing lights on, and everything, and landing and things like that. Well, down below them, there was something going a lot slower and blinking. And we discussed that. And my sister kept saying, oh, she thought it was a UFO. And I kept thinking, no, So anyway, I told her it was a helicopter blinking its landing lights. We continued, and we got off the outer belt on Route 95 going south. And as we went along, there was a woods on one side, on the west side. And I saw this sphere. It looked like it was made out of glass or something. It had a spectrum on the inside, and it seemed to be changing colors, like red to blue and blue to red and purple and all shades of red and blue. And it had something going around the outside, like a globe or something, like rotating. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And the inside of the car turned green. And we drove. I couldn't figure out what was going on because I couldn't see any green anyplace else, but the inside of the car was green. And I thought, this thing must be sending a ray, but it wasn't green. And so finally the light turned off. And my sister was kind of saying, this thing that, we're ahead of us is kind of interesting. And so anyway, finally she started yelling at me and said, pull over, pull over, pull over, pull over, because she said it was going to cross the road. And I just grumbled and said, I was bitten by mosquitoes and I didn't really want to stop, but I stopped. And I looked out the window and I saw something look like a very distant meteor. And later, my sister wrote up a thing and she said that right when we stopped, that the thing shined a light beam, some kind of a funny light beam in our car. I didn't see that, but I was on the side of the window, so if the inside of the car lit up again, I wouldn't have known it. So anyway, right where I saw that meteor, this big thing came over the road. And it had 7 square panels along the side that were blinking, and a little red light and a little green light on one side. It was perpendicular to our line of sight. And we looked at the panels. We had both seen blimps with lighted sides, knew what they were, knew what blimps were. And we thought we were looking inside and that these things on the side were windows. that we could look inside. And I have a YouTube station, and I have a lot of pictures of blimps with lighted sides, so I'm pretty familiar with what they look like. So anyway, it was blinking in kind of a sequence of like the first 3 lights would be on and off twice, and then all 7, and then the last 4, and then go through that again. Well, I was working at it was just unbelievable. It was real slow and low over the car. And we could see it real plain. It wasn't like, something foggy in the distance. It made no sound at all. And we counted the windows and said, do you see this? Do you see this? And compared what we saw, because neither one of us could believe it. And then I worked for the DIA, and I was in photography, photo interpretation. And so I was familiar with photography, but they didn't have much photography back then. It was sort of primitive. But anyway, I thought, I can just get an amazing picture here. I can prove that UFOs exist. I can get, a picture of this over the freeway and stuff. So I had a Polaroid camera, and I had high-speed film. And so I dug in the car and found the camera, and I dug in the car and found the film, and I was trying to load the film into the car thinking, this is just an amazing picture. It's the most amazing picture you can imagine. Well, just at the time I got the film in the camera, this truck pulled over right in front of us and stopped, and the truck driver came back, and I thought, well, we'll have another witness. Well, he came and asked what I was doing and what we were doing, and I couldn't imagine that because this thing was there in the sky, and I pointed at it and said, what's that? Like it was an airplane. And he turned around just in exactly the opposite direction and looked in the opposite direction and said, I don't see anything. Then he turned around and looked at me. And, at this point, I was feeling. But anyway, then he said the same thing. What are you doing? And so I did the same thing. I pointed at it and said, what's that? And he turned around in the opposite direction and said, I don't see anything. Then he turned around and looked at me, and he gave me some gesture, and I interpreted it as he was telling me I was crazy, like I didn't see it, because he kept saying he didn't see it. Then he went back to his truck. Well, my sister, when she wrote that later, she said that I seemed to take a long time loading film on my camera. She didn't seem to know the man was there. And she said that while I was loading my film, that the thing seemed to get someplace else. And I didn't notice that. I was so busy talking to the man and then thinking about taking a picture, I didn't pay attention. But anyway, after he left, it was a lot farther away. And I thought, I'll get lens flares in my camera if I take a picture. So there was a hill to the west. And so I thought I'd climb up that and see if I could get a picture off the freeway, which I did. And I did get one picture. I took 5, but I got 1 and came back. And the thing it went over the airport and it began to circle. And we could see the airplanes up above the airport, and they weren't landing then. We heard no noise from it until then. And it would go in this circle, and it'd go from a half circle from north to south so fast you just couldn't see it. And then it'd go south to north and blink on and off twice. And it just kept circling. And so I thought, well, it was a little bit north of us. It had been south of us, but it was north then. And so I thought we both wanted to figure out what it was. And so I thought I'd get on the freeway and go down to the next interchange and turn around and come back. And so that I got on the freeway. Well, the truck driver got right in behind me, got right on my bumper, and turned his lights on, his bright lights on right in back of me. I was blinded, and I was driving down the freeway here not seeing, and I'd switched lanes to try to get rid of him because I thought maybe he wanted to pass or something. And he just kept right on my bumper, and I couldn't see anything. And I thought, we're going to die. And I didn't know what he was going to do. So anyway, after a while, I thought that I would go down the left-hand lane as fast as I could. And then when I came to an intersection, I'd turn off and suddenly, and see if I could lose him, except that somebody was coming along on the right-hand side faster, we'd be smashed to death and everything else. And it looked like my fault. But anyway, that's what I did, and I think I got rid of him. So then I turned back around, came back, and the thing was still circling, but then it took off to the northwest. And so the roads went north and south and east and west and all that. So I had to sort of zigzag, but I kept following it. And finally, we were on this really horrible gravel road with potholes and houses away from each other and everything. And so I couldn't keep up with him. He was just a tiny bit faster than I could go. So I turned around and went back. And we finally went all the way back to Drew. And I kept waiting for the men. And I waited until dark, and I finally left. And they never showed up. And they were real mad at me later and said they couldn't get a hold of me, which I didn't understand. But I went back to Washington, D.C. And then I had a poltergeist experience. And then finally I got up and everything was normal. And so I went to work the next day. And that day, when I came home, I wrote up a really detailed account of everything that happened. And then just recently, in the last couple of years, my sister found a letter she wrote to my parents on the same day it happened. So that we had 2 write-ups that we did right when it happened, which is pretty good.
First with this story, I want to say that how brave you both are. I think a normal person who would have witnessed something like that would have been frozen in fear or try to get away, but you're actively loading that Polaroid and going after trying to take your shot. And during that time, other than the emotional part, because I know the adrenaline kicks in and a lot of things kick in, was there anything, I want to say physical change, but do you feel anything physically as this green light was upon your vehicle or anything like that?
No. And like the first time in our bedroom, we'd just been absolutely terrified beyond belief. This time we weren't scared, and neither of us could figure out why we weren't scared, but we weren't scared for some reason. We kept thinking, why are we not scared? And so it was just like we were scientific. We were just comparing what each other saw and discussing it, just like, scientists or something.
Wow. And then not long after that, having that poltergeist activity. Now, you think there's a connection there?
Well, I think Kathleen Marden has done studies, and when it happened to me, I'd never heard of poltergeist. And I thought I'd just gone crazy. And I thought I'm going to have to go to work with this high security clearance and this guy's insanity. But many years later, I found out later about poltergeists, and I read some of her research, and she says that often people that have close UFO experiences have poltergeist experiences. And so I guess, the same thing happened to me.
Oh, no. It seems that now, following back with the truck driver, because he kind of disappeared out of nowhere, as you were telling me about the truck driver, I'm kind of thinking maybe he was purposefully being ignorant, looking to the other direction other than where the ship was. Do you think, forgive me, I'm going to sound rude, what was he that clueless, or do you think he was there just to throw you off the scent, so to speak, just try to distract you away from that UFO on purpose?
Well, at first, when it happened, I thought he was a person. And then later I wondered about it because, if you point at something, the person will look at it, even a dog will look at it if you point. Well, I pointed, and he looked in exactly the opposite direction 2 times, which is really an unusual, weird response. Well, then later I just found out recently, I'd asked, when my sister found the letter, I'd been curious about this. And I asked her if she saw the truck driver, and she said no. And she was standing there. But she saw him coming. She saw him when he pulled in front of us, and she saw him chasing us. But she didn't see me talking to him for some reason, which made me think that maybe this is something pretty weird that, the UFO did or something.
Yes, kind of like the reverse Men in Black, where normally you see them wearing nice black suits, driving a nice Cadillac sedan or something like that. And now they can be truck drivers too. You never know. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, I just didn't know. I always figured I couldn't figure out whether he was a person or what on earth was going on, because people have, weird things that happen to them when they're in the middle of a UFO experience, like abductions and all kinds of things. And so this was something weird. And it was like either maybe they deleted it out of her mind that we were talking to him, or maybe they put something in my mind or something. I mean, I just don't know.
Right,
It
and
was
also
weird. He was telling me I was crazy, and he
no,
could have killed us easily.
no, I'm thinking he was the one who was a little bit crazy because if I even if I weren't into traffic with you, telling me, "Hey, you're pointing that way," I'm naturally going to look where you're pointing as well. A mystery, nonetheless. And so, how soon did you start writing about this subject and start releasing articles and such? How far after this
Yeah.
was it?
It was as I approached retirement, because I didn't want to be a scientist and go around saying, I see UFOs. But I found out about the groups and stuff, and then I joined some. And then actually, the first thing I'd published had been the scientific literature. And I actually, from that, I published the picture I took of the thing in the scientific literature too. But then I found out about the UFO literature, and I started publishing as I, after I retired and as I neared retirement and all that.
And then, which brings up to the subject at hand, my friend, with your latest book. Very interesting because there's a lot of varying opinions as to what kind of message UFOs are sending us or what they're here exactly to do. But right before I get to the message part, in your opinion, everybody has different opinions. Are these extraterrestrials, are they actually coming from outer space, or are they just been here all this whole time?
I don't know. I just, again, going back to the early experience my sister and I had, we both were asleep. We both woke up at the same time. This thing was in the room. It wasn't making any noise or anything. And so we don't know why we both woke up at the same time. And then we both became terrified at the same time. And we don't know why. It was like it was, exerting a little bit of mental control on us or something. And it just looked like a little ball, but it, seemed to have an influence on us in my opinion. So I just don't know. I mean, maybe they can just take any appearance they want to. And
I think so. And I'm one of the opinion that they're possibly already here or some sort of existence where we can't see, but they're able to cross from that plane into ours, which is what I guess explains how fast they come and go. You see, where our eyes and brains are not as fast as what they can do.
yeah, and they can disappear and appear and everything else like that. So
right, and it's one of those things where I think that's why we have trouble getting footage. And I'll give you credit thinking of getting a Polaroid and loading the Polaroid, because I remember having Polaroids. It's not a quick load. You got to undo the thing and then put it in and close it. But no, that's terrific work right there. And with the book and with your experience and with MUFON and your investigations, now we come down to the part of the message. What, in your opinion, what have you learned about them and their message? What are they trying to tell us?
well, they give a lot of obvious messages, and like they don't say build bigger bombs and kill each other and things like that. Usually the messages are on the peaceful side, to get along with each other, preserve the earth and everything. But what I was talking about in the book is that I wasn't talking as much about, the formal message like that. I was talking about their appearance and nonverbal communication and things like that. And I was saying that maybe they're suggesting that our ideas of how we started things are wrong, because just in general, it seems like our problem solving is making our problems worse. And like I talked about the end times. Well, we've always seen the end times as something happening to us, like a volcano goes off and kills us, or the sun explodes, or the earth explodes, or, meteor comes down, or plague and all that. But right now we can kill ourselves, and that's totally different from anything, in the past. And so I was saying that as we have the mechanism for killing ourselves, we make the weapons and everything else, and we can, that we may have the wrong opinion about our past, and maybe that's what the message that the UAP is giving us, that we're off the beam on our understanding of ourselves. And I was saying that, our opinion of ourselves is that we were killer apes, and we had men go out with spears and, slaughter mammoths and things like that. And, and that's how we were formed. That's our opinion. And so we solve our problems with making more violence. And that I was saying the media picture of the aliens isn't like that. I mean, it's not big, strong men with, head things, or astronauts in their big suits or anything. What the general picture of an alien is a skinny little female. And like the idea of aliens in spaceships and things kind of started with Kenneth Arnold, and right afterwards with Roswell. Well, I've been at Roswell several times, and they have, molded images of the aliens, and that would be the most basic place you could go because it's where it started. And the aliens are females. And so I was saying that maybe our conquistador ideas are being questioned, or, they're saying that maybe telling us, in words and in pictures too, that maybe we have the wrong opinion of our past.
And that's definitely very possible. And one could think that the gods of the past, who were considered gods, were possibly just extraterrestrials trying to give us a message of, hey, you keep going down this path, there could be utter destruction. And in a way, they were correct, because if you look at mankind, any kind of technology it learns kind of falls into two things: either to make a lot of money or for war. So if they were to share with us some sort of technology right away, we're going to reverse engineer and use it to do terrible things to each other.
Yeah, and so I was saying that maybe our opinion of our past is formed through, brutality, and like Charles Darwin, of competition and all that. That may not be right, because I think there's a lot of evidence now that cooperative behavior is better than competitive behavior. I mean, like in nearly all, they say survival is fittest, like the fittest survive and everything else dies. Well, if you look at females and males, the males go out with, and fight and everything, but the females live longer. And I think survival of the fittest, you kind of need to be cooperative rather than antagonistic to survive, maybe. And I was saying that may be a better behavior pattern.
Yeah, because with, and not to make a blanket statement, but it seems that, at least on the physical side of things, men to take more risks, where the female thinks a little bit better about, yeah, you really shouldn't do that. And I think that's why there's a separation that, the smarter one lives longer, because they know not to take foolish risks, as I guess the guys do every once in a while.
Well, I have a PhD in veterinary science, and I took a lot of biology. And like when Charles Darwin gave his idea of competition, survival of the fittest and everything, he didn't know anything about reproduction. And he said, well, these males will fight each other, and then the fittest leaves descendants and things like that. Well, biologically, only the female can pass life from the one generation to the other. The female passes an egg. This is alive. All the male passes half the DNA. I mean, in a lot of species, the females can reproduce with no males, but all the males have to reproduce through a female. And so that idea that, competition of the males and they determine the next generation isn't true, because in lots of species, the females can reproduce by themselves, and the males are completely dependent on the females. And when a male reproduces through a female, he still only gives half the DNA. So that's something that Darwin didn't understand. And just the basics of reproduction that they understand now. But that's why another thing is that males compete with each other, and they show this as the end of civilization. I mean, how it started and everything. But they never say that the reason the males are competing with each other is because they're competing for the females. And they always leave out what the females do. And so it looks like, what they say, that the males compete and then their heredity goes on. And that doesn't work with reproduction. It also doesn't work with behavior, because the males are competing for the females because the females have a lot more to do with their survival. I mean, the males fight to mate, and that's it. The females, they go through, pregnancy, birth, or laying eggs. They take care of the eggs, they take care of the young, and all that. And that's why they survive. And it has a lot more to do with, the females raising and taking care of the next generation than it does the males fighting.
And as you're talking about that, I'm starting to think about when these cases of extraterrestrials, when I use the word abduct or do experiments on females and such, and always involves impregnating a human and then taking out the fetus or the womb or something like that. Is there something to it? Because maybe I'll say the female aliens, have they lost their ability to reproduce, which is why they're trying to do these experiments with human females?
I don't know. That's an element, and I just don't really know. I mean, I have a theory on that.
No, it's a wild question, because it always seems to be.
No, it's not wild, because it's what a lot of people report. But I mean, I just don't know, because not everybody reports it too. I mean, some people just report that they were looked at and examined. And on my next book, I'm kind of sort of saying that there's some kind of communication. And sometimes it takes the form of abduction, but it may take other forms too, such as talking to people or close encounters and all kinds of things. And maybe there's just a spectrum, and the abduction is part of that rather than just a hard and fast abduction. I don't know.
It's one of those things that I don't know if we'll ever get the full answers. Maybe in 100, 200 years, things, will be more enlightened to find out more. They'll be willing to share with us what they're trying to teach us. Now, going back to the MUFON part and your investigations, when you're interviewing somebody, what are the clues you're looking for to where you're satisfied with the testimony of the person? Say, yeah, this is the real deal.
Well, the thing is the government is a huge obstruction, because they've gone to all kinds of trouble to ridicule people that experience things, so that people can't discuss it. And that's the way to shut off all your information. I mean, you're not getting any information if everybody, won't talk about it. And so, that's the big problem with the whole thing is you're not facing that lots of perfectly sane people, are having these weird experiences. And I just record everything I can possibly record. I ask, all the questions I can think of. Plus, I also ask, did you tell anybody this? Did you have other witnesses? And that sort of thing. So that, I can have an idea of who else they might have shared the information with, and things like that, to try to trace it backwards. But I generally trust people. I mean, I don't think I've never really interviewed anybody that I really thought was lying or hoaxing. I think, there's a lot of misidentifications and things like that, but I guess I'm naturally trusting, but I don't really, there's no way to tell. But I just write down everything I can possibly think of and ask every question and collect the information I can get.
No, and that's perfectly fair and honest on that part, because you talk about the misidentifications as well, because with the growing numbers of people who've said they've seen a Bigfoot or a dogman or werewolves, and sometimes they see something they had misidentified. It could have been a bear, it could have been a coyote or something, but you always write down the notes. You keep asking the questions, because in their minds they for sure know what they saw. And as I stated earlier, probably during the pre-interview, is there's a lot of skeptics out there. They're quick to say no, it's a hoax or special effects. You don't believe until it happens to you. And
yeah, I think, and in the field of science, up until very, very recently, you shouldn't talk about that at all, because the government had everybody saying, well, this doesn't happen. You're crazy if you see it. So people couldn't talk about it. And there's just a very little slight opening now that people can do that.
Yes, with the rise of these social media platforms, a lot more people are sharing these stories or videos and photographs and what have you. If you don't mind, I'm very curious, and you don't have to name names. During your time and being an investigator, is there a story that sticks out to you the most that you can share?
Well, what I'm investigating now is Pascagoula. Philip Mantle and I just wrote this, Beyond Reasonable Doubt. And it's about an abduction. I don't know if you've heard about it or not, the Pascagoula abduction.
I'm not an expert on it, but I have heard a little bit about it, yes.
Okay, it was these two men that went out fishing, and they were just perfectly normal people, nothing weird about them. And they got abducted. And one of them talked about it, and one of them kept quiet for 50 years. They're both dead now. But anyway, like a typical abduction, it's like somebody goes out in the woods or someplace by themselves, and they report an abduction, and then they come back, and nobody believes them because they don't have any witnesses, and their camera doesn't work and everything else. And so there's no evidence. Well, this was totally different, because these people, the abduction happened close to a city, and there were people around. And so we've got a lot of other witnesses that saw something on the same night as the abduction. And we even had two people that were on the other side of the river from where they abducted and saw the abduction and were abducted themselves. That's what they reported. And so anyway, we've got a whole lot of evidence that somebody else saw something, which is really, really different from most abductions. And I guess that's something that's standing out, because we've done quite a bit of research on that, and I've talked to a whole lot of witnesses. But I also, when it happened, the police department there that night, the night it happened, got around 50 reports from people all over saying, I saw something, I didn't understand what it was. And then Hurricane Katrina came and wiped out that information, unfortunately, but we're still finding a lot of witnesses that saw something right when it happened.
Wow. And when someone witnesses these type of events, normally I say, and it's shameful to say, I normally say, don't go to law enforcement with this. Go to somewhere else reputable that you can report your sighting or your experiences. Where do you recommend, if somebody has something to share, where can they reach out to where people have a better sense and understanding of the subject?
Well, I'd say MUFON has a good civilian database, and they have field investigators and everything like that. But I don't know if people naturally have heard of MUFON. So people that haven't heard, they probably call an airport and report it or something. And I hope the airports, there's several civilian organizations that, the airport will tell you to report to too. And so, I think it's well to, reports. People are freer to report now than when everybody was going to say you're crazy.
Yes, and I think we live in I would say a little more open-minded world when it comes to these type of subjects. There's still a lot more room to grow when it comes to these type of things. There's a lot of skepticism out there, especially now with the way it's been the last few years. I think people are becoming more hardened towards things, but I think with the slow drip of disclosure and maybe starting getting more trust in some of our leaders, some, not all, and maybe one day, hopefully before my days come, where I'll actually get to see or maybe trust more of the information being given to us by, I'll say, world governments. And before we go, my friend, your book, Aliens in the Apocalypse, The Meaning of Alien Messages, for the listeners of Let's Find Out that not only want to get their own copy of that book, but want to learn more about you and what you're going to be doing, where can they go find out?
Well, I have a website, irenascott.com. They can find out about me there. And I'm also on Facebook.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit kgradb.com. That's kgradb.com. Together, we will get one step closer to finding out. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania.
All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.